to me that, ooh, Periscope. If you don't know what Periscope is, it's a live video streaming app that I'm addicted to, and I do sex education on it every day. Some of my Periscope peeps are here, so I'm gonna hear Periscope notifications going on. So it's really important to me that what I talk about and what I teach is supported by science, because that's how we get to truths and general patterns of how things work, as opposed to opinions and stuff. So pretty much everything I talk about, everything I say is supported by science. I'm not putting up the references to the papers and all that, but if you really want to know, if you really want to read the boring science behind that, email me and I'll share some of the boring science with you. You can geek out on the statistics and methodology and all that if you want to. I've done a lot of research on casual sex, academic, and then also I run the Casual Sex Project. How many of you have heard of the Casual Sex Project? Okay, a couple. Well, for the rest of you, you should go on the Casual Sex Project and perv on people's hookup stories to begin with, because we have over 1,900, I believe, stories of hookups of all kinds. And if you feel so inclined, you can share your own hookup stories if you have any. Good, bad, it's all good. It's all accepted, because we want to showcase the diversity that is casual sex. And so, kind of based on all this research, based on all these stories that we've collected, I kind of want to bring you some of the most useful and applied advice on how to navigate the world of casual sex, because there's a lot of casual sex going on out there. I don't know, for you in particular, you may be having a lot of it, you may be having none of it, because you hate it or because you can't get any. I don't know. But young people are certainly having a lot of casual sex, and more older people are having sex outside of relationships. And oftentimes we're very kind of conflicted about what it is, how we should be doing it, should we be doing it to begin with or not. So I did sort of a very short version of that in my TEDx talk last year, and we're going to do a little longer version of that here. Okay, so oftentimes, in our culture, casual sex is portrayed to us kind of as something like smoking. Or something like smoking with the kids in the back of the car. Right? Something that's is bad for you, or is bad for you and or someone else, but you can't really stop yourself from doing it. You can't help it. You have some, for whatever reason, you end up doing it again and again. And then you have other parts of our society, our culture, our internet, whether it's more sex-positive communities or not so sex-positive communities like pickup artist communities and such, where casual sex is something like clean air. Oh, it's amazing, it's great, everyone needs it, we can't live without it, it's perfect. But let me ask you a question. What is your relationship? Let's think about your own relationship with casual sex. Think about the last few maybe one-night stands or fuck buddy relationships or friends with benefits, or I don't know, that really hot person that you hooked up on a vacation. How did it make you feel? Look at some of these reactions that you may have had, some positive, some negative, and think about how those experiences made you feel. How many of you had at least one positive reaction to your casual sex experiences? Look around. Pretty much everywhere. Not everyone, but most people. How many had at least one negative experience or reaction? Same thing. Not everyone, but a lot of people. And that's what research is showing, really. That it's, casual sex is not something that's necessarily universally bad, that should come with, a cross and bones symbol of, warning sign, do not go there. But it's also not something that's universally amazing and great and fantastic. and should be recommended to everyone. Every week, you should have one casual encounter, preferably Fridays or Saturdays. No, it really, the relationship between, whether casual sex is good for you or not really depends. Depends on who you are and how you do it. Not everyone was built the same way. Not everyone is susceptible to some of the challenges or issues or complexities that casual sex can bring to the table. So what I think the research shows, and what I try to communicate, is kind of move the conversation from casual sex as being something universally bad like smoking, or something universally amazing like clean air, to something that's more like sugar. Sugar in and of itself is neither bad nor good. I mean, you might think it's a bad thing because we have so much of it, and a lot of people have issues because of that, but it's not universally bad. It's a great thing if you're an athlete post-workout. That's why our bodies evolved to like sugar, because we really need it. But it's not very good if, say, you're a diabetic who doesn't do any exercise. So it really depends. It's kind of the same thing with casual sex. So that's what I want to do. I want to kind of help you figure out, kind of guide you through some of the factors that whether casual sex that determine whether casual sex is going to be good for you or not, and then get some applied kind of tips on how to do it well. Some of the many that we could potentially talk about. Okay, let me take a step back and just define casual sex for you, because it can be a very sort of broad definition. What are some things that come up when I say casual sex? Like, what are the kinds of relationships you think of? Yeah.
Short time that you don't have a long-term commitment.
Short time that you see someone, or okay, so like someone that you see for a week.
That you already just met. It's not
Someone
like this intention of like years of relationship.
Okay, someone you don't know very well, someone that you don't necessarily want to date for a long time.
Physical pleasure without the necessarily the component of emotional involvement.
Yeah, no emotional involvement.
One-night stands or no strings attached relationships, friends with benefits. Like that.
One-night stand, someone you're never going to see again. Friends with benefits, that's kind of on the other end of the spectrum. It's someone you are going to see again and again and again and again potentially. Maybe you can be friends with benefits with someone for years, right? But then it goes back to the no romantic commitment. You're not really building a long-term relationship, right? So there's a lot of stuff that can potentially define what is casual, the casualness of sex. And in research, when we've talked about these things, we kind of, you can think about three general qualities of sex that make it casual versus non-casual, or that determine kind of the continuum of casualness from completely casual to completely not casual or romantic or relational. One is familiarity. How well do you know your partner, right? Is this someone that you just met? Maybe you don't even know their name. Or is it someone that you've known your whole life? You've been together for decades. It's a continuum, right? And it's kind of a combination of how long you've known them, and also how many interactions, what kinds of interactions, how much information do you have about this person? Maybe you've never met them in person, but you've heard about them quite a bit from other people, and so it kind of all goes into this familiarity aspect of how well you know someone, from not at all to very, very well. And then somewhere in the middle, does that not work? Oh, too bad. My pointer doesn't work. Somewhere in the middle, maybe it's not like a cut and dry, point at which casualness ends and relationship, sex begins. But somewhere in the middle is that gray area. But it's not always just about how well you know people. The other thing is what someone else pointed: emotional attachment. How emotionally attached are you to this person? From not at all. I feel absolutely nothing about this person, have zero emotional connection, to I'm deeply, madly in love with this person. Some of the photos are right, and again, this is a continuum. There can be a lot of different points along that continuum, from not caring at all whatsoever to being madly, completely in love with them. And again, somewhere in the middle would be, where casualness ends. And then the third component is commitment. What Ian was talking about. Are you committed to having a long-term relationship with this person? From the one-night stand, I don't ever want to see this person again. As soon as sex is over, I'm going to put my clothes on and get the hell out of there. Or maybe not. I'm like, oh, it was great, but I'm done. I'm good. This is great. I don't need to see you again. To we are committed to be together forever, or we till death do us part, or
divorce.
Or divorce. Exactly. Yeah. Oftentimes it doesn't end till death do us part. In fact, about estimate? About 85% of all romantic relationships end in breakup. The 50% of marriages, but of all romantic relationships, about 85% end in breakup. So I want you to kind of keep these in mind, these definitions, and any given sexual encounter doesn't have to all line up. Like sometimes you have the most casual of the casual. So you're having a one-night stand with someone that you just met, whose name you don't know. You met them on the subway, and then you said, "You come here. We're gonna fuck somewhere in an alley down the road." I don't know if you guys do that, but it can be super fun for those who like that sort of thing, and it's possible it does happen. Right. So that's like the most casual of them all, but they don't always have to line up, right? You can have a one-night stand with someone you know very well, but you end up not ever wanting to do anything more with them. Or you can have, you can feel emotional attachment to someone but not really be committed to them. So they can, you can kind of have different sexual encounters, have different levels of familiarity, emotional attachment, and commitment. I think it's important to think about these qualities because some of these create different types of casual encounters that you may be more or less inclined to enjoy and benefit from versus get harmed by, depending on how you're built, depending on your psychology, depending on your physiology. You may be really well suited for one-night stands, but not well suited for friends with benefits. Say you get emotionally attached really easily, but you really love the novelty factor of new people. But if you have, and we'll get to the emotional attachment, but if you fuck them again and again and again, you're gonna get attached, and then you're gonna get your heart broken, and so maybe you should stay more with one-night stands. On the other hand, if, say, you need a little more time, you need to know people a little bit better, you don't need to be romantically committed to them, but you might need a little more familiarity, then maybe a fuck buddy or friends with benefits is a better fit for you. Okay, so how do you hook up healthy, and what does that depend on? And in the book, I talk about 7 different, and there might be another 1 or 2 factors most supported by research that show that whether you're going to benefit mentally, physically, sexually from that experience depends on how well you suited are to casual sex on these factors and how well you kind of go about doing these things. So I'm going to give you sort of the general 7 big pieces of advice, and then we're going to break them up, and I want to help you understand why they matter as much as they do, and why it's important to implement some of the more specific kind of rules, guidelines that go under these. So, and we're not going to get through all of them, unfortunately. For that, you're going to have to read the book. or sign up for my mailing list, or come to my Periscope broadcasts, or something like that. But we're probably gonna get through four of them. So the first thing is, make sure your casual sex is authentic to who you are as a person, that it's in line with your desires, your values, your interests, that it reflects who you are. And we'll talk more about that. The second one, pleasure. Make sure you give and get as much pleasure out of it as you possibly can. Learn to manage the chemical high, the attachment that happens often following sex, whether you want it or not. Maintaining sexual health, managing your sexual health, reproductive, no unwanted pregnancies, STIs, and all of that. Making sure you always have and provide and get enthusiastic consent for all of your hookups. Getting social support and dealing with the slut shaming and social stigma that often comes from engaging in casual sex, especially if you do it a lot. And what's a lot depends on where you live, who your friends and family are. But wherever, almost all environments have a point that's a lot. There's a limit. It might be 2 partners, it might be 10 partners, it might be 200 partners, but most people have okay, no, that's too much. That's too many partners. So, kind of managing that well. And then finally, incorporating casual sex, if you're that kind of person, into long-term relationships that is done well, that's done in a way that's honest and open and doesn't involve lying and cheating, which is absolutely possible if that's what you want.
Quick question.
Yes.
When we go to sustainable relationships, are we going into maybe polyamory? Is that
Uh-huh.
right? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
We're probably more into swinging and open relationships, because poly is kind of more about long-term relationships with multiple people rather than casual sex, but that's a very fluid kind of definition of what is poly. And, I use the term consensual non-monogamy as an umbrella term for all different types of relationships that include either sexual and or romantic non-exclusivity. Okay, so let's talk about authenticity first. And I like to talk about authenticity first because it often is so critical that kind of bleeds over into everything else, into all the other factors, and it really influences how you deal with all the other aspects of your experience. As I said, what I mean by authenticity is your values and your desires, what you want to do, and then what you think is okay, that is morally acceptable and appropriate to do, which is not always the same, one and the same. Ideally, they line up well, but they don't always line up. And so it's really critical to line them up and then line up your behaviors, your actual lifestyle choices with your values and desires. So, desires first. What we really want, what we crave. I love the bunnies. So when we talk about desires, it's you can think about desires for casual sex as type of an orientation. So think about sexual orientation, and you think about gay, straight, bi. But that's not the only sexual orientation, technically. I mean, we can argue about the definition of orientation, but you can think of other sexual interests and preferences as potential orientations, like some people are more monogamous versus non-monogamous, some people are kinky versus vanilla, some people may be sapiosexual versus, I don't know, what's the opposite of sapiosexual? Body sexual? Like, I don't know, not brain, whatever. Shallow sexual. Sure, I'm totally shallow sexual. Guilty as charged. Nothing wrong with that. So your interest in casual sex, your desire to have casual sex, is also kind of an orientation. And in research and in sort of the academic world, we have a name for it. It's called sociosexuality. or sociosexual orientation. And it's a continuum. Goes from, oh, it does work, it's not on the screen. Damn it. Sorry. So goes from completely unrestricted, the people who don't need any kind of familiarity, any kind of emotional attachment to people, and any kind of romantic commitment before they want to have sex with someone, before they feel like, okay, yes, you know, the stranger on the subway in the dark alley, do you want to do that or not? If you're unrestricted, or if you really want to do that, if you see someone, you're like, yeah, totally. I don't need to know anything about you, right? Then you're on the unrestricted end of the continuum. On the other end is the restricted sociosexuality, sociosexual orientation. People who do need a lot more familiarity, emotional attachment, and romantic commitment before they even desire to be sexual with someone. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Is that learned from childhood?
Good question. I'll get to that in a second. First, I want to show you how it's distributed in the population, more or less, and it depends on age. So, sorry for being so heteronormative, but and sort of gender stereotypical. But blue is boys and pink is girls. That wasn't my choice, but we're doing this in a hurry. Anyway, just forgive me for that. So. Well, this is the blue curve is a normal distribution, which is how a lot of traits in the general population are distributed, like intelligence. You know, there's few people who are very low in intelligence. There are few people who are very high in intelligence, and most people are somewhere in between. So the y-axis represents sort of the percentage of the population who falls at a different point along the x-axis. So with men, they seem to be normally distributed in terms of sociosexuality. There's few men who are absolutely not at all interested in casual sex, few men who are absolutely crazy, they want to have sex with, hundreds and, thousands of people, and then most men are somewhere in the middle. With women, it's a little shifted. It's not a normal distribution. There seems to be more women on the restricted end of the spectrum, and then some women, certainly not no women, but fewer than men on the more unrestricted end of the spectrum. Now the reasons for this, if we get into that, we're going to stay here till tomorrow. So I'm not going to get into this too much because, of course, everything is nurture plus nature, and so I don't want to get too much into that. But I do want to talk a little bit about why different people are differently distributed along the spectrum. And it has to do a lot with biology. So the first thing that people think was, just like the question, is it due to childhood experiences early in life? And sure, it can, early experiences can play a role, but we do know that biology plays a role too. There's something about testosterone that plays a role, and especially in terms of general sex drive. There's something about dopamine, your sort of reward chemicals and reward center in the brain. So some people have a version of the dopamine receptor that is more geared toward novelty seeking, sensation seeking. They get bored more easily. They just need more novel stimuli. They get really, really, really excited when things are new and shiny. And other people who are, okay with things not being new and shiny. In fact, if it's new and shiny, it's kind of scary. It's like, oh, it's unknown, it's scary. I need to get to know it before I go there. And that's not just for sex, that's for pretty much everything in life. Some people like roller coasters and skydiving and base jumping, and some people are like, no, thank you, I will stay firmly on the ground. Thank you very much, right? So it's kind of the same thing. And there is research to suggest that people with, one type of dopamine receptor gene allele are more likely to have casual sex, one-night stands, to cheat on their partners, to be interested in kink, and other kind of sexually adventurous things than other people. So I like to point this out. Of course, there are environmental influences, social influences. What are the norms where you live? We have research from multiple different countries, and of course, when in more progressive or egalitarian nations like the Netherlands or Denmark or Sweden, people are more unrestricted than in nations like that are less egalitarian or less progressive. Also, the gender difference that we see in men being more unrestricted than women is much smaller in gender equal countries. So you look at Pakistan, and men are much more unrestricted than women. You look at Denmark, and there's still a gender difference, but it's like almost gone. It's not completely gone, but it's much smaller. Social factors might influence women's sexuality more than men's sexuality, but of course, to some extent, it influences both. But I like to talk about the biology and kind of emphasize the biology because people don't really think about it. It's always like, oh, it must be some childhood trauma, that's why you want to have a lot of sex with a lot of people, and there's something wrong with you, especially if you're female. There isn't possibly a healthy reason or a non-sort of pathological reason why you could be interested in this. Yeah?
Is childbearing one of the biological factors?
Is child what?
Childbearing one of the biological factors? Women bear children and men don't?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For the difference, for the gender difference? Yeah, absolutely. And the different costs of, getting pregnant and all that. For sure, that's part of the reason for the gender difference. But the individual difference within men and within women, some of these other factors play a role. Yeah. It's funny, just the other day, someone came to me, one of my Periscope viewers, and said, I can't have sex with someone who I'm not really emotionally attached to. What's wrong with me? I'm like, nothing's wrong with you. You're fine. You just don't like casual sex. It's fine. Just don't try to have casual sex. Get to know people a little better. Get, emotionally attached to them. Make sure they're emotionally attached to you, and then have sex with them. It's perfectly okay. It's like, really? Like, yeah, really. It's okay. You are, on the restricted end of the spectrum, and it's perfectly okay. So wherever you are on that spectrum, it's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with you. Just make sure that your behaviors align with where you are on that spectrum. Does that make sense? So if you're thinking about your own sort of where you are and where your thoughts and behaviors and desires are, think about these three continua. How well do you need to know your partner before you have desire to have sex with them? Can you get all super excited about the stranger who just walked in and whose name you don't know? Or do you need to know them quite well? Or maybe you need to know them a little bit. Maybe a little bit of information from your friends will do. Or a couple of dates or something like that. So where you are on that spectrum. How emotionally attached do you need to be with that person before you want to have sex with them? Like my Periscope viewer, she needed to have a decent amount of emotional attachment. Someone might not need at all. And then how much commitment? Do you need to know that this is something serious before you want to have sex with them or not? And again, these don't have, your interests and preferences, they don't all have to line up. Yeah.
How did you categorize people who change their minds?
Yeah.
Normal.
Normal, exactly.
Or it depends on the person, the chemistry.
So yeah, it absolutely can depend on the person. So this is not set in stone, right? This is not like, okay, you were born with this and this is it forever and ever. It's fluid. It changes over the course of your life. You might be in different circumstances at different points in your life. Sometimes we need more security and stability, and so we're more kind of restricted in our thoughts and needs. Sometimes we've had a lot of security and stability, and so we kind of need a little more, craziness and novelty and, sensation seeking. So it's absolutely fluid. And then you can have different feelings about different people. But when you if you think of all of that as kind of like variability around your mean, your average, we all kind of have an average. All of that put together, at any given point in time, we are somewhere along that spectrum, more or less. Again, it can change over time, and it can change, with different people. But, you can kind of take a look at that spectrum and be like, okay, I have a pretty good sense. Like, can you see that? See yourself somewhere along that spectrum? Like, look at that and be like, okay, I think I'm kind of over there. I have thought about this quite a bit. So yeah.
Can you also be on the spectrum with the different genders too? Like with the men, you can be.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're attracted to, both men and women, or, men, women, trans people, and yeah, you can have different, absolutely. Because one gender may feel safer or, whatever, in terms of certain things than others. Yeah, I mean, I certainly know people who will have casual sex with women, but not with men. Or vice. Do I know someone who does vice? Maybe. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally. So yeah. Okay. So really important. Find where you are on that spectrum, and then by figuring out where you are on the different aspects, that also kind of determines the types of casual sex that might work for you or not. I was listening to a Sex Nerd Sandra podcast a couple months ago, and if you haven't heard Sex Nerd Sandra, she's awesome.
What do you think?
Sex Nerd Sandra.
Okay.
She has an awesome sex podcast. But she was saying, yeah, I can have casual sex with someone. I just have to know them for like 4 years. Right? So she was okay with uncommitted sex, but she needed to have a lot of familiarity with that person before she had casual sex with them. Right? So it really doesn't have to be all lining up. Okay, so that's all desire. And often when I talk about desire, people still think about desire plus attitudes, plus values and morals. But that's a separate issue. So put desire aside, what you actually crave and want to do, and think about values, what you think is okay to do, is morally acceptable to do. That is healthy, is smart, is acceptable, right? It's a complete separate system in our brains of what we think is okay or not okay. Unlike desires, which are which have a pretty heavy biological genetic component, our attitudes don't have. They do to some extent. Some people are more predisposed to have more conservative versus more liberal attitudes, but a lot of our attitudes about what is right and wrong comes from upbringing. So, if you went to a school where you had to experience, the teachers, the nuns measuring your skirt to determine what level of sluthood you qualified for. I don't know if you can read these, but it's like matronly, prudish, old-fashioned, proper, flirty, cheeky, provocative, asking for it, slut, whore. I'm not sure why whore is worse than slut, but apparently it is, in Catholic school at least. So, right, depending on where you grew up, that it will affect your desires, but it will even more so affect and organize your attitudes and values. So that's the other thing that you kind of need to ask yourself about. Again, all of these three, but now not do you want it, but more do you think it's okay to do it? So again, how well do you need to know someone before you think it's okay to have sex with them? How emotionally attached you need to be to someone before you think it's okay to have sex with them? And again, these don't always line up. You may really want to have sex with that stranger who just walked through the door, but your values are saying, no, that is not cool, right? Or it could be the other way around. It could be, oh, I think it's perfectly okay to have sex with someone you just met, but I have no desire to do that. And if you're there, that's like being straight and thinking there's nothing wrong with being gay, right? Like, I'm okay with casual sex, I just don't want to do it. If you're one of those, go find yourself some slutty friends and make friends with them, because they need your support. Seriously, they need some slut allies who may not be sluts themselves, but are supportive of their friend's sluthood. And when I use slut, I use it in the most positive way of people who love to have a lot of sex and don't have a problem with it. Same with prudes. It's like just people who don't want to have a lot of sex with a lot of people. No judgments. It's perfectly okay wherever you are on that spectrum. So that isn't, that kind of discrepancy between your values and your attitudes and your desires is not problematic necessarily. But the other way around is kind of problematic. If you really want to have sex with that stranger who walked through the door, whose name you don't know, but your values are saying, no, you can't do that. That is kind of like being gay and thinking you're going to burn in hell because of that, right? Like, oh, I have this really strong, I mean, it's kind of an orientation to some extent. So those needs can be very, very strong and pulling you in this direction, and your values are saying, no, you can't do this, it's not okay. You're going to burn in hell because of that, or you're going to, be hurting people, you're going to be hurting yourself, whatever it is whatever the reason is that you think that's not okay. And in that case, you kind of have a difficult decision to make. Are you going to try and repress your desires, you hope they go away, and live in line with your values, which, if it's like an orientation, we know how well that works for being gay. It actually does work for some people. They might not be perfectly happy, but they manage in the right environment, with the right kind of support, they manage not to express those desires. They might never go away, but they manage not to actually have sex with people of the same sex. So, you could try to do that. It's not going to be easy. The other option is you change your values to accommodate your desires. Maybe move to a more liberal environment, find friends who are less judgmental, family, whatever. But that can be difficult too. That might mean moving and leaving everything behind and all that. So it's not always an easy decision of how you're going to go about it. But it's really important. Lifestyle, that's what authenticity is, lifestyle decisions that match your values and desires. And it's really important because we have a mountain of research evidence to support that when people are authentic in their behaviors, any kind of behaviors, not just sexual behaviors, any kind of things that you may do on a daily basis, from exercise to going to work to school to taking meds to anything. When people are authentic in their behaviors, they're happier, they're healthier, they do those behaviors better, more effectively, more efficiently. They're on this like spiral of health and happiness. When they feel inauthentic in their behaviors, then they get depressed and unhappy, and they get sick more often, they die sooner, they're more lonely, they're not as effective in those things that they're trying to do. They're just worse at all of that. So authenticity is really, really, really key for health and happiness overall, and that goes for casual sex. And I think when we talk about casual sex authenticity, the sociosexual orientation and figuring out your sociosexual orientation is the key to authenticity, and how authentic and how different types of casual sex may or may not be authentic to who you are. So a little recap of all of this. So figure out how much you desire and approve of casual sex, sort of in general. Think about the different types of hookups depending on these different sort of elements or qualities of casualness versus non-casualness. What types of hookups might be really authentic to you? And then each time you're about to hook up, maybe think about, are you doing this for authentic reasons? Are you doing this for the right reasons? Because even someone who's super unrestricted may end up in a situation where they're not really doing it for authentic reasons. And what are authentic reasons? And this is actually some of my doctoral dissertation research. Authentic reasons are because you just wanted to hook up with this person, because you were horny and attracted to them and wanted fun and excitement. You wanted something new. You wanted to explore your sexuality. You wanted to try something new. Yeah, that's about it.
So novelty.
Novelty, excitement, pleasure, sexual pleasure, attraction, yeah.
Do you find that there's a correlation between risk, people that are attracted to more risky stuff, like the jumping out of buildings, the whole free climbing and all of that, and the more unrestricted people?
Yeah, there's definitely
Okay.
a positive correlation between general sensation seeking and sexual sensation seeking. They're not perfectly correlated, so there are certainly people who like to jump out of airplanes and don't like casual sex, and vice versa. we have a volunteer here, yeah, guilty as charged. Yeah, and vice versa, but there is a positive correlation. So, but that doesn't mean that every single person, right, who has that desire also has the other desire. What do you think are bad reasons, inauthentic reasons to hook up with someone?
Manipulation, or
Manipulation?
like thinking they'll love you or something.
Yeah. Hoping it's something more, right, than it is, or that it's that you're going to get them to want something more because you had sex with them.
Coercion.
Coercion, obviously, doing something that you didn't actually want to do.
Emotional avoidance.
Emotional avoidance, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Impaired thinking.
Impaired thinking.
You know, like you drink too
And
much
what can
and, like,
impair
I'll go
thinking?
home with someone, you know?
Yeah. Alcohol. Yeah, you got drunk. One of the most common reasons to hook up, and probably the single most most common inauthentic reason people report for having hooked up: alcohol. I was drunk. Yeah. Sometimes high too, but drunk. Really, alcohol is the number one sort of. A little slide later, beers, proud sponsors of casual sex since 1959 or something, and they really are, or 1859. So, alcohol, peer pressure, right? Because everyone else is doing it. Because I don't know, maybe you're trying to get something else out of it. So all of these other things that are not authentic. So avoid. You kind of check in with yourself. Maybe each time, especially if you're new to it, especially if you're maybe a little tipsy or drunk, and you're kind of unsure, like, am I doing this for the right reasons? Do I really want to be here? Do I really want to fuck this person? And if you're not sure, walk away. There's going to be another opportunity to get laid, because that is going to lead the next day to you feeling like, oh, I didn't want that. I really shouldn't have done that, and that sucks. That's not a fun feeling to have the next day. And then, a really important last point with authenticity is not about you, it's about your partner. Make sure that they're on the same page too. That this is not, something else for them, that this casual encounter, if you know that it's casual for you, make sure that they know and are okay with that level of involvement, and that they're doing it for the right reasons, and they're not passed out drunk or, which is obviously a very common scenario. Okay, how about authenticity? Does this make sense to people? Do you have like a little better sense of where and why? Does someone want to share with the group? Like, I feel very awkward asking this because, it's casual sex, and all the slut shaming and whatnot. People are like, yeah, I'm super unrestricted, I want to fuck 500 people. It's like, no, people don't want to say that. But if someone wants to share, please do. Yeah.
I find that certain environments aren't exactly conducive to having this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Like especially like checking in with your partners and whatnot. Like for example, historically there were like men's bathhouses and things like that where you would go. Like you're not really gonna have like a chat about where each of you are at and stuff like that. It's more about
Sure, yeah.
nonverbal communication and just going for it.
Yeah, it definitely depends on where you're meeting people. So the gay bathhouse is a very casual sex specific space, right? Where people are pretty,
That's what they go there for.
that's what they went there to do. So you probably don't need to do as much checking in as at a regular bar where you meet someone and they may have different expectations. But yeah, so I guess if you meet someone off of Grindr or Tinder, but with Tinder, Tinder's a little tricky. People are using it for relationships now. But there's a new one. I just learned about this. Pure. It's a new app called Pure. It's Pure Sex. It stands for Pure Sex. And the way it works is you download the app, and then when you're ready to hook up, you upload one photo. No description of yourself, no additional photographs, one photo of yourself, and then your profile is active for 1 hour only. And you have 1 hour to find another person, match. It's the same kind of Tinder thing. If you like them and they like you, then you can have a conversation for 1 hour. And in that 1 hour, you have to get off that app and either decide that you're gonna, exchange numbers and meet or not. Then it disappears. That's pure sex. There's no connection to your Facebook account. There's no connection to your Instagram. You have no other information about these people.
So how much do they give you that hours? Every 24 hours? Every week? Every
Oh,
month?
I'm not sure. I literally just learned about this yesterday. I haven't tried it yet. I downloaded it, but I haven't played with it.
Probably serial.
Hmm?
Serial, probably. Serial hours.
Serial hour, yeah. Like maybe you have to re-upload your photo each time that you want to restart the hour or something. I don't know. It's very interesting.
It would be funny if you don't have a backlog of photos. You have to take your camera and take your photo right
then. Yeah.
That'd be fun.
This is me right now.
So you have to take a selfie. For it.
So I'm really curious as to whether that's going to catch on and whether people are going to use it or not. But so if you meet at a place like that, you meet on Pure, then you need to do a lot less checking in, perhaps, than if you meet on OkCupid or if you meet at a bar or here or I don't know, some other place. Okay, let's talk about pleasure. Pleasure is kind of the whole point, sexual and also often emotional pleasure. So we didn't talk much about that, but that's often a reason. People just want some closeness and intimacy and passion. They want to experience these things, sexual intimacy, emotion, sexual passion, not just, friction. Oh, this feels good on my clitoris, but also, there's some level of connectedness with the partner. So that's kind of the whole point of casual sex. There's not much more that it can give you, or in many instances. So it's really critical that you get as much and you give as much pleasure as you possibly can, physical and emotional. The good news is that about 60% of undergrads, and this is a large sample of over 20,000 undergrads from 24 different universities in the US, enjoyed their most recent hookup very much. If you add to that percentage those who enjoyed it somewhat, it was a 4-point scale, not at all, a little, somewhat, very much. So you add the somewhat and very much, and then you get to about 90%.
Wow.
Of both male and female students.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow, not expected, right? And mind you, these guys are having the worst casual sex. Like for real, because they're terrible at it. They're doing it completely drunk. They're not really authentic. They're not owning it. They're hooking up with douchebags, and it's bad.
Jesus.
And yet they're still enjoying it. Fair amount, very much. But there's an orgasm gap. There's a big elephant in the room. Despite women enjoying it almost as much as men are, in the same study, 78% of the guys had an orgasm during their most recent hookup, which involved intercourse. So of the intercourse hookups, these are the data. What do you think is the percentage for the women?
12?
20.
12, 20?
19%.
19? If you know it, if you've seen me present this elsewhere, don't say it.
7%.
7? Oh, ouch. Damn. That's really pessimistic. Oh.
Wow.
Did you say 42? I heard that. I was like, have you heard this before? Oh, okay. Well, there you go. 42.
It's the answer to everything.
It is the answer to everything. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm kind of glad that it's 42 because of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But you have no idea what I'm talking about.
Monty Python.
No.
No.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
But Monty Python, they
Did they?
answered to everything. It's 42.
Oh.
Maybe they got it more
Media
than
flight.
Python.
It's 42.
Okay, I'm so confused right now.
Right there with you.
Okay, never mind. Either one or the other. Okay, back to the orgasm gap in hookups. So it's not as dismal as some of you here thought it would be. So it's not 7 versus 80%, but luckily, I mean, good news. But it's a big gap. We're talking about half of what percentage is for men. And this is not just for hookups. There's an orgasm gap in long-term romantic relationships as well. But it's not nearly as big as this. In romantic, so the same study for the people who had had romantic sex, the percentage gap was about 15%. So I think about like 90% of men had an orgasm and about 75% of the women had an orgasm during their most recent romantic sex encounter. But it's a big gap, and in fact, often when women kind of talk about casual sex in more open-ended and more qualitative interviews rather than these kinds of quantitative studies, they'll often say things like, just casual sex is not very pleasurable, it's not very good, and that's why I don't want to do it. Often, especially in heterosexual kind of interactions, they're like, guys don't know what they're doing, they don't care about, whether they're gonna please you or not. It's just not good. There was a Tinder profile that my husband came across the other day saying something like, if you're here for the hookups, swipe left. That means that you are so embarrassingly bad in bed that you can't stand the disgusted, disappointed face in the morning or something like that. Like, Jesus Christ, what have you run into in your life? It's not all that bad, but there is this perception, and there is research to support it, that women often, when they think casual sex, they think bad sex. Everything else aside, they think bad sex. And so that's obviously, if the point is to have good sex, and if they think they're not going to get good sex, then they have less incentive to go out and actually do it. So why do we see these differences, both in terms of gender and both in terms of within gender variability? Why do some women actually 40% who do have an orgasm versus many others who don't? And also less of a variability, but still there's also variability in men. One thing, and this is something again people don't often think about, is some of us are easier than others. And by easy, I mean how easily do you get aroused? We have, our brains and bodies are wired in different ways. Some of us have very, very sensitive sexual accelerator. My husband, you say the word blowjob, and he gets a hard on. Or starts getting a hard on. Maybe not a full hard on, but things start to move. Other people need a lot more before they get to that point. It's not enough to just say one word, right? It doesn't have to be a word. For someone it can be a look or a touch, or it's just that's how their brains are wired. They're more easily excitable than other people. And obviously, the more easily excitable you are, the easier it is to get pleasure out of hookups, which just don't happen often in the most ideal circumstances. The other process is sexual inhibition, your sexual brakes. So once you're aroused, some people will get distracted by the smallest little thing, a loud noise, a distracting thought. Oh, I didn't pay my rent. I didn't do my laundry. Shit, right? Oh, maybe someone can see us. Maybe someone will walk in. Or, oh, the condom broke. Or, oh, I can't put the condom on, fast enough. For some people, that's going to kill their arousal. For other people, nothing phases them. Like, oh, sure, there's a party going on there. Whatever, right? Again, it's how we are wired. Same with, orgasmic capacity to some extent. Some people can have lots of orgasms really quickly. Some people need a lot longer to get to that point. Yeah?
Isn't physiology or just biology an impact? Women's sexual things happen to be hidden away where men have penis outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So all of these things matter.
Okay.
How we're, genetics and how our brain chemistry is wired, how we're brought up. So there's definitely a gender difference in that respect. But also, some people, some men are more easily excitable and more easily inhibited than other men, right? So there's a lot of individual differences within gender. And certainly it's much more difficult for women to access that, both because of internal anatomy, pleasure anatomy, and or not as obvious external pleasure anatomy, and because of social repression that's much stronger for them than for men. But these are real, actual differences. How sensitive are your sexual accelerators, and how sensitive are your sexual brakes in your brain? The easier you are, the easier you get excited or aroused. The less sensitive your brakes are, the more you're going to enjoy casual hookups, especially of the most casual kind. That might happen, like a quickie with someone you don't know. Maybe they don't really know exactly what they're doing. So, hookups are often, they happen in less than ideal circumstances with people who don't know you very well, who might not care about your pleasure. And so the easier it is for your body to get pleasure, the more you're going to get out of hookups to begin with. Any questions about that? Yeah.
Does age affect this also?
Yeah, things can change over time, absolutely. All of these things, like we all have like a baseline at some point, but things can change over the life course, whether just because of aging or because of different experiences that we have. Yeah, but in any given kind of point in time, we are somewhere along that continuum. Okay, another reason why hookups are often pretty bad or end up in bad sex is poor literacy, or poor sort of sexual literacy and sexual knowledge. Our society really doesn't do a very good job of teaching people how to please themselves, how to please others. It's not like we have, Cunnilingus 101 in sex ed in school, in high school. The best you might get is, here's how to use a condom, if you got lucky and went to a comprehensive, sex education curricula kind of school. If you went to an abstinence only, they'll tell you that condoms don't work, and that you're dirty if you have sex before marriage, and then you're screwed. But yeah, so there's just a lot of lack of sexual knowledge and understanding, both of our own bodies and of other people's bodies. My favorite, non-favorite piece of data is about masturbation in women. There's a nationally representative study that just came out a couple years ago, asking people how often, whether they've masturbated in the past month. What percentage of women do you think did not masturbate in the last month? Did not touch their vulvas and vaginas in a way that was fun and pleasurable.
About women of all ages?
Yeah, across ages, or
20%.
20% did not.
70%?
70. Wow, we have from 20 to 70%. That's a wide range. 6. So depending on the age, anywhere between 50 and 75% of women did not masturbate at all.
They're lying.
I hope so. I really, truly hope so. But it's an anonymous survey. They're filling out on their computers, and there's certainly some lying going on surveys. There's no doubt about that. I mean, absolutely. But God, do you get from 75 down to like 60%? That's still pretty damn depressing.
What's the number for men?
Yeah, good question. It's between 10 and 30%.
Oh, that's interviewing clergy members too, right?
Yeah, it's just don't think that they don't masturbate, by the way. A lot of them actually do. There was a survey that just came out, not a very good one, but with Catholic clergy, I think. Looking at how many of them watched porn, and a lot of them watched porn. Like something like 40% or something said that. It was a small sample, but still. Anyway, so yeah, anywhere between like 10 and 30% of the men did not masturbate in the past month. when you ask them about the past year, obviously those percentages decrease more. More people have masturbated in the past year, yeah.
Is there any data on the effect of masturbation versus sexual arousal with your partner, or how it affects your pleasure with your partner?
Some.
Negative or positive?
Some. There's. God, I don't want to get into that too much for the group. We can talk about that later more. But there's a crazy German scientist who tries to prove that some of the Freudian stuff, that vaginal orgasms are better than clitoral orgasms. So he does this research where he finds like sex with a partner is related to better mental health than masturbation kind of sex. Sex with a partner that didn't involve clitoral stimulation. And I'm just so very skeptical of that data. And it's never been replicated by other people. It's only this crazy German scientist and his group. But anyway, so we can talk more about that later. There's so much sex science that is out there that's absolutely fascinating, and so much more that we don't know.
Do you know the source of this image?
It's from the Cliteracy Project.
Okay.
So I did not come up with this. I'm not that good, or can it? But yeah, there's a sort of a project, ongoing project about sexual knowledge and cliteracy, especially for female sexual pleasure. Okay, so we have, why hookups sometimes end up being not as fun and good as we hope that they will be. We have different levels of arousal, arousability, and inhibition. We have poor knowledge of oneself and other people and what they might like. Another reason often is low sexual assertiveness. And this is especially problematic for women. We don't teach women to say what they want and to ask for what they want, especially, again, in heterosexual interactions. And a lot of the research that we have is on heterosexual hookups, but the sort of the general patterns and principles apply to everyone, no matter what your gender or sexual orientation may be. But so women are just often don't feel comfortable expressing like, I want this, or I don't want this position, this doesn't work for me, I would rather do this. Because, I don't know, we don't want to hurt their ego, or we don't want to appear too sexual and too slutty, or, whatever, whatever it is, we're taught to be more passive and quiet and let the guy lead. I see her over there like, no. Well, yeah, goddamn no. But I mean, that's what we grow up with, and so that's the reality of the situation. There was a study with a large sample of Texan women, young women, and they were asking them, do you feel you have the right to say that you want or don't want something sexual? And they listed a number of different things, like how I like to be touched, or that I have the right to tell them how I like to be touched, or that I have the right to tell them that I don't want to have sex with them if I've had sex with them before. And again, somewhere between like 40 and 60% didn't think they had the right to say something about what they wanted or what they didn't want with their partners. And this is sexually active women, young women in Texas. So it's pretty depressing when you think about that. And then the other problem, sort of the opposite problem, is, again, and especially in heterosexual hookups, is this very depressing piece of data that we have, that men often, when it comes to casual sex, don't give a shit about their female partners. And they'll actually say that to a female interviewer. They'll say, oh yeah, when it's my girlfriend, I totally want to give her an orgasm. That's a badge of honor. But if it's a hookup, I don't give a shit. Like, that's a quote in one of the papers that got published a few years back. And so, they don't care. And couple, they don't care with the women not saying anything, and obviously you get really bad sex for the women. And then finally, I think a lot of people are just terrible at navigating and negotiating that post-sex moment. And that's when people are most vulnerable. That kind of can often make or break the experience. Do we leave this feeling like, oh, this was something that was good, that was right, that it was a beautiful experience, even if it wasn't the most amazing experience in the world, this was still something good and positive, or are we going to leave that experience feeling this was something shameful, this was something bad, it's like we did something stupid, something I didn't want to do. And so people are often really, really bad at what they do afterwards. Usually putting on your clothes immediately after orgasm and running out the door is not the thing to do, usually. I mean, there are situations when, you're rushing to get somewhere and it's negotiated and it's obvious that, okay, this, I have to go. But usually that's not the way to do it. Now, we could stay here for a very long time and talk about exactly how to do all of these things, but we don't have that much time. So here's sort of a quick list of some guidelines that you might consider. So first of all, know what you want. Know what you want sexually. And you can do that by masturbating, by watching porn, by coming to, sex educational workshops like this. Uh-oh. Know what you want. Know what you want. Damn it, Jana. Sorry. I can spell, I promise. Most of the time. Yeah, so that should say want. Thank you for catching that. So, know what you want. Sex ed sessions, here, workshops at the Pleasure Chest, and online, so many online resources to kind of get some ideas, learn. Do some R&D with your partners, like research and development sessions with partners, right? I mean, casual partners, especially long-term casual partners, I think can be a great resource for that. Maybe probably the first time you have sex with them or the second time you have sex with someone, you kind of, you're trying to learn what is going on, what they might like, where your overlap may be. But then, the third time you may be like, hey, I got this new prostate play toy. You want to come over and try it out? Or, whatever. I've never squirted. Let's try and make me squirt. Or, so you can kind of actually have a very let's see what works or what doesn't work kind of play sessions with people. I think of them as R&D sessions, research and development sessions. Then thinking about, right, how easy you are, how easily you get aroused and inhibited, create the situations that fit that fit your your brain activation and inhibition system, right? So if you're someone who needs a little more time or who gets inhibited very easily, distracted very easily, then probably like a hookup in the bathroom of a club with someone you just met is not going to be the ideal scenario. Maybe a fuck buddy relationship with someone you know a little more, and you can go over to their house or invite them over and have an uninterrupted 2-hour session would be a better scenario. Ask for what you want or like, so the assertiveness stuff. And I mean, we all have a certain level of assertiveness that we have, but and some people are just generally more dominant and more assertive than others, but it's something that you can train, it's something that you can work on. You might be a little uncomfortable in the beginning, but the benefits are just huge, and so it's worth pushing through that discomfort a little bit, or taking sexual or just general assertiveness training, and also just by learning what you like helps with being able to express for what you want. If your partner is not getting it, take matters into your own hands, quite literally. And again, this is often a problem with women. They won't do this. Guys will often do it. They'll take the penis into their own hand and finish the job if their partner is not finishing the job. Women often don't do it. I teach human sexuality at New York University, and when I say this to my students, they're like, but that's going to offend him. Like, if I touch myself, that's like, it's going to hurt his ego. What is he going to think about me? It's like, no, stop it. Like, do it. Touch yourself. And research shows that the hookup studies, when women incorporate self-stimulation in their hookups, they are, I think, 3 times more likely or 4 times more likely to have an orgasm during that hookup than when they don't incorporate self-stimulation. So, get some skills, right? Learn what other people may want, and that kind of goes back to the, how to do that is kind of the same things that knowing what you want. Try to be passionate, giving, and attentive. Don't be a douche, basically, in the sexual situations, because it makes for such a better experience for everyone involved. If there's some level of connection. I mean, we're all capable of forging casual intimacy with people, and having casual intimacy even during the most casual of casual encounters of one-night stands is still possible, and it will make for a better experience for everyone involved. And then the post-sex interaction stuff. God, there's so much that I could say about that. But some of my favorite things to do or to tell people that work is don't run away right away. Stay there, cuddle for a little bit, have a little post-sex chat with them. Thank them for the experience, for sharing that experience with you, even if it wasn't the most amazing thing ever. Just generally make them feel like what they did was not bad or shameful or wrong. That, even if you don't want to see them again, that it was still, you're grateful for them having shared that experience with you. Don't make promises you're not going to keep. Please don't say, oh, I'll call you, I'd love to see you again next week. And then when you actually have zero interest in doing that. No need. It's just not nice. I don't know, any other thoughts about that? I mean, there's a million other ones, but yeah.
How do you handle the conversation if one person wants to follow up and then the other person does not?
Yeah. I mean,
What are the sensitive, attentive, warm words you can say? Politely, because it's difficult.
Yeah, no, it's
Say no politely.
Yeah, it's nice to be polite and gentle and kind. So think about being gentle and kind. Of course, it'll depend on the situation, but try something like, I'm really glad that we had this experience, but I'm not interested in continuing this, or I'm not interested in repeating this. And then if they ask why, which a lot of people will, then you kind of have a choice of kind of ending the conversation there, or going into, well, maybe you're not my type, or the chemistry wasn't right, or I'm just not really looking for anything more than a one-night stand, or a short fling, or whatever it is that you had up to that point. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can negotiate that, I think, but think about kindness, right? Being kind and nice to people. And there's things like you can be very honest, but then honesty can hurt. And sometimes people there's nothing they can do about that. Like, oh, well, something about their physical appearance or something like that. So I wouldn't go into too much detail of why exactly. I would just be like, the chemistry wasn't there or something like that. I don't know. Anyone has a better or a different approach? Yeah.
Preloading the experience and kind of getting upfront expectations on both parties.
Yeah,
so you can
that
be like,
always helps.
That makes it 100 times better. So at the end, it's like, oh yeah, we already agreed upon that, and it's super sexy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's.
I think
when I was, talking about checking in with your partner, right? That's kind of what, setting expectations and hopes and desires for the future. That helps. Yeah. You had kind of the same thing.
We're not a match. I don't think we're a match.
Yeah.
It's kind of, that's experience in the past.
Different ways. Yeah. Chelsea.
I have the perfect line.
Ooh, give us the perfect line.
I don't think this is going to develop into something either of us wants it to be. It's vague enough to not be hurtful, but final enough to close the door.
No way. I was like, what does that mean?
Like, exactly. No one line is going to work for everyone in all situations. Some people will be like, but why? Why? And what do you think? what do you think I want from this? And like, so yeah, I mean, any way you try to close the door, someone might keep pestering you for more information. So yeah, it's not always easy to know when and how to stop. But you know, especially if it's over text or something, you can be like, I'm just not interested in continuing this, period. If they were a jerk, though, if they were a jerk to you, then do tell them that they were terrible at this and that. And, absolutely. And this is another thing that you might, if it was more about something that they can change, if it's not something about, I don't know, your penis size or something. Oh, please don't say anything about their penis size. They're so obsessed with it already. But the most common. On Periscope, doing sex education, my two most frequently asked questions: how do I make my woman squirt, or something about squirting, and squirting the pee is whatever, and does penis size matter, and how do I make my dick bigger? No, something related to penis size. Obsessed with penis size. So don't say anything about penis size. But things that they can change, like, well, I don't feel like you put in enough effort into this. You know, you didn't really try to, do something for me. Or when I asked you to go down on me, you did it for like a second, and then you put your, you stuck your dick in my mouth. And I was like, no, that was the other way around, right? So whatever it is that they did, you can, if it's something about effort and trying, that can be kind of a constructive feedback for the future that you may or may not want to give to someone if they're asking for information. Yeah.
I think an example would be, for example, if you say to a guy you were too rough,
Mm-hmm.
that would be give him the opportunity to say, oh, I didn't realize that, next time I'll be less rough.
Yeah, or be more attentive, to what the other person wants or is saying. Yeah, absolutely. Or too gentle, or whatever it is. Okay. So that's pleasure. Let's talk about the chemical high a little bit. So sex kind of sets in motion a whole cascade of neurochemical processes in the brain that makes you want to bond with the person that you just had sex with. And the more sex you have with that person, and the better that sex was, the more orgasmic that sex was, the more other bonding activities it involved, like cuddling and gazing into each other's eyes and sharing intimate information and spending the night and having breakfast in the morning and like all of those things. The more of that you do, the stronger that bond will grow. And this is something that's kind of involuntary. Like it doesn't. Often it happens when we don't want it to happen. Like you're having sex with someone that you don't want to date, you don't want to have a long-term relationship. In fact, you're pretty sure that would be a complete disaster, and yet you can't help yourself. Right? You're like, oh my God, I want them so badly, I can't stop thinking about them. It's called infatuation, and it's kind of a disorder. It's a disease. I don't know, disorder, disease. We talk about infatuation in terms of symptoms, literally. So the symptoms of infatuation are, acute onset. It like strikes us out of nowhere. It just happens to us. Mental preoccupation. We can't think about anyone or anything but the person that we're infatuated with. Mood dependency. How we feel depends on what the other person has done. Did they text us? Did the text, come across as positive, or are they not really, responding to us? Oh, it's been 2 hours. Why hasn't she responded to my text? Right? And then we feel terrible. So mood dependency is a huge one. Idealization is another symptom. We think we have these rose-colored glasses over our eyes, and we think they are the most amazing person that's ever existed on the planet Earth, failing to see all the kind of negative potential.
It's like, oh, they're awful.
Exactly, yeah. Then, usually it lasts, depending on how intense your relationship with that person ends up being, you usually wane anywhere between a few months and a year and a half. And then when the rose-colored glasses come off, you're like, oh my God, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? That was crazy, right? There's no way we could potentially be together. So it's involuntary, right? It happens when we don't necessarily want it. our brains are kind of on drugs. There's oxytocin, there's dopamine, there's phenylethylamine, there's vasopressin, like all these chemicals that create and facilitate bonding and this kind of strong relationship. Now, women are on average more susceptible to this than men are, post-sex bonding. And there's some social reasons, but there's also some evolutionary reasons for that. You know, if you ended up, the person you had sex with, you ended up pregnant, you kind of need that person to maybe stick around and take care of you and the baby to some extent. And that's not the case anymore to a lot of our lives. That's not the case anymore, but evolutionarily speaking, that was the case for a long time. So if you think about it, for women, repercussion-free casual sex is an evolutionarily novel experience. It's a luxury that women didn't really have back in the day, when our survival and the survival of our children depended. When first sex ended in pregnancy very, very often, and two, the survival of the woman and her offspring depended a lot on the men in her life, and so it's going to take a little bit or longer than a little bit for our brains to kind of catch on or catch up with what how the things have changed for us. But we still may have those desires. It's just it might be a little more difficult to manage the stuff that happens afterwards. But that said, so there's a gender difference, but again, there's a big individual difference within gender. So some women are much more susceptible to this oxytocin building, whatever, attachment building post-sex than other women. And some men are a lot more susceptible than other men. So some of us, and you can think about this for yourself, right? After you've had sex with someone, especially if it was good, do you all of a sudden start thinking, oh, I wonder what our babies would look like. Oh, I wonder what our wedding would look like, or at least, are they going to call again? Is this going to turn into something more or not? Some of us are a lot more prone to having these thoughts than other people. Again, depending on how we're wired, past experiences, biology, and all that. So depending on where you are on that spectrum, it might be a good idea to stay away from those kinds of encounters or not, or maybe you need to manage some of these issues a little more. So use some of the managing strategies a little more. So a couple of these strategies. Figure out how easily you get attached, and then depending on that, either kind of stay away from casual sex or manage it. Use the other strategies a little better. One strategy I think is really useful for some people, not everyone, is reason. Think about, try as hard as it might be to take those rose-colored glasses off your eyes for a little bit and kind of go down your relationship checklist, which I hope you all do, whether it's an actual checklist or it's kind of a mental checklist in your head, and think about, find all those red flags of incompatibility, because for most people that you just had amazing sex with, there'll be a shit ton of red flags of why you two would never make a good couple long term. So kind of go, flag those things, and then keep saying that to you. No, it's like, this is not going to work out. It's not going to work out. Stop. It may help or it may not, but it's worth the try. God damn it, stop. I think I obviously can't tell you what should be on your relationship checklist, but I think there's one thing that should be on everyone's relationship checklist, and that's they want to be with you as much as you want to be with them, or at least they want to be with you. If they don't want to be with you for whatever reason, you may think they are absolutely the absolute perfect partner for you. If they don't think the same, then it's not going to happen. That's a very big red flag of incompatibility, right? So if that's the case, then that's the case, as sad as that may be. You might want to limit bonding activities. Again, depending on where you are on how easily you get attached, you might not want to spend the night and gaze into each other's eyes all night and cuddle all night and have breakfast in the morning and then and then see them again the next day. And that's probably never a good idea with casual encounters. Space out meetings, maybe once every couple of weeks, every couple of months. Yeah, so again, some people will need to do this more. There are people who can have all those bonding activities and still not get attached. And there are some people who really kind of need to pull back. And that depends on different partners too, right? Sometimes you're like, oh yeah, I'm totally fine with this person. Great sex, but I would never, we can have as much sex and eye gazing as you want. I'm never going to get attached. And then there's this other person that you completely lose your mind over. So you might need to limit your bonding activities with that person a lot more than with the other person. Space out meetings. Curb your stalking needs. Please.
So don't look up ex-girlfriends on the Facebook?
Yes, don't look up ex-girlfriends on Facebook. Don't spend hours, checking out all their photos on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat and wherever. Stalk them on Periscope if they're broadcasting. Come into every broadcast and, hi, it's me again. When are we going to see each other? Whatever. So a lot of us will do this when we're kind of infatuated or starting to get infatuated. We'll stalk these people. But the more you're thinking about them, the more you're seeing them, the more you're interacting with them, whether it's two-way interaction or one-way interaction by these kind of stalking social media activities, the more you're feeding the monster. You're fueling your infatuation more. So try to keep yourself distracted. Distractions are your friend, whether that's work or friends or other hobbies, or, what's a great distraction?
More sex.
Other partners more sex with other people. Yeah, rotation. Have a rotation of partners, because there's no better way to keep your mind off of, this problematic, one person by having like 3 other people that you're going to see in between him or her and the next time you see them. So, yeah. Again, it's not going to work for everyone. None of these are going to work for everyone, but these are some things that you might consider. Another good one, it's again, might be good for some people, is having a romantic partner already. So a lot of people say that, and especially I've heard this from women, that they always struggled with getting attached to all of their casual partners, like having those, attachment thoughts of marriage and babies and whatnot after every time they had sex with someone new, until they got into a long-term relationship that was open, and then they had their attachment figure. And so it kind of became easier to not have these thoughts about these other people, because that kind of part of their brain was taken in a way, that was just so much more easy to manage. Sometimes you know that it's not going to work out, but it just feels so damn good, because infatuation is a really powerful drug. And I don't know, if you want to live it out for a little bit and the other person kind of wants to live it out, fine, go ahead and do it, but be prepared for the downfall, because it's going to happen. And but if you're okay with that, then that's okay. And then finally, if things aren't working out, if you feel like you're going to get hurt, and it's clearly that you want more than the other person, or vice versa, you clearly seeing that the other person wants more, and you're just keeping them around for sexual pleasure. Don't do that. Just walk away, or let them leave, and be a good person in that sense. Because sometimes we can selfishly want to keep them around because it feels good to us, but it might not be good for them. Yeah.
Just a quick question with say you're in the chemical high infatuation phase and the person doesn't, do you think it's like, I don't know, sometimes, or do you think one should like communicate like I'm into you and just pull away, or just ignore them because they don't fucking care anyway? Like,
Yeah, well,
Is there, I mean, I know there's not one answer, but that's
Yeah.
always an interesting thing, to get someone even involved in your emotional process of.
I mean, it depends on what kind of relationship you've already established. Hopefully, that's not going to happen to people that don't give a fuck about you. Because I hope that, you know, part of all this is that you're going to end up having better hookups with better people who are going to care about your pleasure. So, you know, one of the things that I probably didn't mention the pleasure stuff. Like, don't reward bad behavior. If someone was a jerk to you, don't go back to them, right? Don't reward bad behavior. So hopefully, if this is happening, it's happening with someone who also feels at least somewhat, you know, positive towards you. So I think it's okay to communicate that. It really depends, but I think it's okay to communicate it. And then, you know, maybe they feel the same way. Sometimes, you know, there's so much ambiguity, you don't really know what's happening, and maybe they do feel the same way. Maybe they do want to explore and do something more. And if they don't, then at least you're going to know. Because one of the things that fuels infatuation the most is uncertainty. And there's research on that too. Plenty of research on that. So once you know that someone's not into you, then it's easier to kind of detach and be like, okay, this is not going to work out, I'm going to walk away. But if it's kind of unclear, if they're sending mixed signals and you have enough reason to believe that maybe it's okay, maybe they're interested, maybe they're not, maybe they are, maybe they're not, then it just fuels and it keeps going. Any other, yeah?
How could you spot someone who's like all into infatuation? Like, how would you spot the types of people who are going to be infatuated?
They're crazy.
They're crazy.
Yeah,
Well,
how do you spot something
it is kind of craziness. Like your brain is on drugs. It's like on cocaine and ecstasy.
Yeah,
It's your endogenous versions
How
of
do you
cocaine.
like spot them? It's like,
Well, how often are they texting you? How often do they want to see you?
but do they carry themselves a certain way? That's
They
what
look
I
like
want.
me. They act like me.
Oh my God. You're hilarious. Yeah, I mean, do they carry themselves?
It's like, do they like you for you, or do they just want to like someone?
Well, there's that too, but they could be liking you for you. It's just like, if you don't feel the same way, then it's a problem. I mean, these people are not like crazy. It happens to all of us. It is kind of a state of insanity, temporary insanity, but it's.
Well, isn't that what they sometimes call love?
Well, yeah, and that is.
But they get called stalkers too.
Well, yes. Again, it depends on what the relationship is. If you're not giving them any, feedback that you want anything to do with them, and they keep, pestering you and calling and showing up at your doorstep, or coming to the bar where they know you're going to be hanging out at, or something like that, then it's really getting to a stalking kind of. But more often, it's someone that you have some communication with, that you are maybe hooking up every now and then, but they just want more than maybe what you want. So they're trying to get to meet with you more often, or have more interactions and conversations with you over text or phone or whatever. Any other ways that you found maybe that's useful to manage? Or do you have a question or something?
I had a question on the monogamy, on monogamous couples that decide to open their relationships. What's the success rate that those couples last, or does the success rate go down? Does they actually break up and start opening a relationship?
Oh, I wish I had an answer to that question. I don't. That kind of research, that kind of question requires longitudinal research, where you follow a certain group of people over time. And that's more expensive, more complicated to do methodologically, financially, and all that. And so we don't have that kind of data yet. We just don't know what percentage. And what you would need to do is get a group of these couples that open up, and then match them with a similar group of couples on age and race and socioeconomic status and whatever, and then who remain monogamous, on relationship length and all that, and then see maybe 5 years down the road which group had a higher percentage of breakups. And we just don't have that. What we do have from non-monogamy research is, when you just sample a group of people who are monogamous versus non-monogamous and ask about things that correlate with these things, with sort of relationship quality questions. So you ask them, how satisfied are you in your relationship? How much passion and intimacy and love and communication and all of these things like sexual startup money from their when they got their position and something, because they don't, a lot of these are online surveys, they don't take that much resources to do. Some of them are funded by small kind of foundations, like the American Institute of Bisexuality, for example, that we have a representative of, may fund some research, so kind of smaller. The Kinsey Institute may fund some research, so yeah, depends. Every now and then we get big, like NIH, National Institute of Health money, or National Science Foundation money, but often that kind of money is given to HIV prevention, or HIV research, something that has more tangible kind of outcomes that they're interested in, rather than these kind of more, I don't know, curiosities, yeah, that it's harder to taking a step back from the infatuation, again, going down your long-term match.
Right.
Because and they are really adamant about not wanting kids, then that's not going to last. If they really want to move to the suburbs and you really want to live in the city, that's not going to work out, you know. So yeah.
I have a tip.
Yes.
I think one way of increasing the chances of a relationship lasting is by not pledging monogamy.
For some people.
Yeah.
For some people, that is. For others, it's not. I don't think. I think there's a fair amount of people who are pretty happy with monogamy or mostly monogamy, and so. But yeah, I think that those are things that should be negotiated and discussed, as opposed to we get into this relationship and we just assume that it's going to be perfectly, completely monogamous for the rest of our lives that we're together. You know, is watching porn on your own, is that okay or not? For some people, it's not. You know, there are people who think if my partner is watching porn, they're cheating on me. Is watching cam girls okay? Is even jerking off okay? No, seriously, I had a Periscope viewer write to me one day after I'd been talking about something, and I was showing my husband's fleshlight. I was like, yeah, you know, I have a fleshlight here for my husband, and this is how you do it. You know, I open it, I showed, you know, you put some lube, you put your penis in there, blah blah. And then I get this email saying, oh my God, I'm 60 years old. I've been, you know, married for a very long time, a couple of kids in a very conservative environment. That was considered cheating. And he was like, you made me feel normal. But actually has a fleshlight for him to masturbate with. Like, that just blew my mind and made me feel normal. I was blown away by that. But so yeah, it's determine what your actual rules of monogamy mean. But I don't think it's something that everyone needs to do. I think some of us are monogamous, some of us are not monogamous. I like to think of that as, again, as a continuum. Just like with sociosexuality, that some people are really completely non-monogamous, they're just terrible at staying faithful to anyone or just being with one person, and then some people are perfectly happy being with one person for a very long time. So again, figure out where you are on that spectrum, and then create a relationship that will kind of fit with that. Yeah.
Is there a possibility you could spend the last 5 or 10 minutes on sexual health, please? I really came here for that.
Oh boy.
Dr.
Yeah.
Jana wants to say on sexual health.
All right, sexual health spiel. I can't go into like, here are all the STIs and, you know, these are all the odds of getting stuff, because that's a lot there. The way I like to think about this is, well, obviously, sexual, you know, getting STIs or unwanted pregnancy is not a very fun thing to experience, and part of that is the physical unpleasantness of having to deal with these things, and a huge part of it is the social stigma that comes associated with this. You know, there's research showing that when people that people think that if you gave someone chlamydia without knowing, by having unprotected sex with someone, and that someone had to take one round, that you're a worse person, that you're more selfish, that you're and you did the exact same thing. You had unprotected sex with someone, and that someone either died or had to go to the doctor and take 1 week of antibiotics, and you're a worse person for giving them that. So there's a lot of social stigma associated with STIs. And so I think that needs to. So what I like to talk about in terms of casual sex is determining 3 things for yourself. 1, what is your actual level of risk? What are the risks out there? You know, what are the STIs and the, you know, if pregnancy is an issue or not? And what kind of sex you have, what kind of people you have sex with. So what is your comfort with risk? We all have very different levels of comfort with risk. There are people pre-exposure prophylactic for HIV, so I don't get HIV. I'm just going to go to the doctor and get it taken care of. If I get herpes, it's not a big deal. I'll deal with the outbreak every now and then. And there are people who say, if I get oral herpes, my life is over. I'm not kidding. I had a partner a few months ago who said, yeah, if I get I would rather get hit by a car than get oral herpes. Whoa. He's like, really, dude? Now and then, and your life is, you know, perfectly normal, except maybe you can't kiss or give blowjobs, or go down on women, or whatever, and you would rather get hit by a car. Like, but that was his level of comfort with risk, and so figure out where you are on that spectrum, and what feels comfortable to you or not, and then how good is your safer sex game. So some people are terrible. If they're in the heat of the moment, yeah. Oh.
Really quick, I think they used to offer it here, but they have like a travel safe sex kit. It has a condom, lube, a dental dam, etc. So if you are promiscuous like that, you should have. Always be ready, people.
carry.
If you're not prepared, you're preparing to fail.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I ask you a question generally
Sure.
about herpes?
Sure.
Isn't it possible to have herpes as a kid? Like herpes simplex 1, which is cold sores?
Yeah, a lot of people get it as kids.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not just a sexually transmitted infection. Yeah, I mean, it can be transmitted that way, but